and God's hidden. All right. So what did Jesus expect would happen to him? His actions suggest that he had confidence that the Lord would shatter the Roman world order and inaugurate God's kingdom. Jesus is arrested and brought before the chief priests, who ask, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus answers yes, and he is sentenced to death. He had to die to reign over man as part of God's plan, is what our message is from that. He said, "It is finished," when he died. So his plan was finished. He had done what he was supposed to do. Now, this is the evidence from the internet. There are no Roman records that detail Jesus's miracles. Part of that was because their gods could do miracles too. So to them, this was not anything unusual, a miracle. The accounts of Jesus's miracles came solely from the Christian Bible, and scholars believe they were intended to validate Jesus's message and identity. And I'm sorry I'm reading, but this is really tiny print, so I have to really focus on it. I can't just glance at it. However, some scholars argue that the disciples provided eyewitness accounts in their accounts of the miracles, and that multiple attestations in the Bible demonstrate agreement that these miracles occurred. So like I said, the feeding of the 5,000, that's in all four gospels, so it's repeated. And some of the other ones are repeated with just minor, sometimes the same account, and then others with just minor little changes. Early non-Christian sources like the Jewish historian Josephus and critical sources like Celsus mention Jesus performing startling deeds, though they may interpret them differently in their book. So the story of Jesus's life is so compelling that we are still talking about it today. And here is a quote from Elaine Pagels. "What we infer from the New Testament Gospels depends on what we treat as valid evidence and what we choose to ignore." So, all right, let's start. Okay, so I don't know if you've been thinking about these questions as we've been going along, but what do you think is meant by the historical mystery of Jesus?
Well, we mostly do not know what Jesus really was like.
That's the mystery part. And we only have tidbits from history that can give us a glimpse.
Mhm.
I agree with that.
He's blonde and blue-eyed, yeah.
Oh, right. I had on my PowerPoint, I picked a picture of him that was made from the Shroud of Turin. So, but it was really a good picture.
There's several mysteries, and what he did, what he really did, and what was myth. What he said and what he really said. What he thought, who he thought he was. I mean, the Gospels seem to even waver on that, depending on which one you want to read and emphasize. But also, I've been struck for a long time by all the things that weren't recorded. He said so much more than this. He did so much more than this. And we just have a few snippets, tidbits, I think Mary Beth said, and that's frustrating. Yeah.
Another part of the mystery really is that Jesus spoke in parables. And I loved Pagel's discussion of that because I think they were puzzles. And the example she gave about the person with the demons called Legion, and he put it into the pigs, and that all of that being referring to the Legion that had been local and hated, and of course pigs was their representation, and pigs have a dirty connotation to Jewish people. All of that, it just, to me, it opens up these these possibilities open up new understandings, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned that Galilean Judaism was, the mystery was sort of baked into it. It was all about, and then the oppression factor of the Roman Empire. So a lot of things were there, potentially there were like hidden meanings couched in these things.
So I think that's where the literal people miss sometimes, that there's a hidden meaning in there. It's not really that hidden, you know, you just have to look for it. It's instead of being so literal about everything.
Well, I kind of chuckle because I work in an area that's about change management, and you do kind of ease into things and use stories as examples, and because you've got to break down barriers and so forth. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I was struck by the comments made on parables. You know, if the initial part of Jesus' message was based on his the influence of John the Baptist on him, and is exhorting the people to repent in the way it may have been meant years ago, rather than the way, you know, we beat our breast in sorrow for sin, meaning so putting on a new orientation to life and a more spacious mind. So the parables were important because they invited a person into that spacious place in themselves. So they weren't relying on the authorities or the temple or you know, some other religious program or belief system, but they were encountering the kingdom within themselves with that new mind.
That's a good point.
I always thought it was like, how did Jesus decide which miracles to perform? Were they already in his mind that, okay, it's day whatever, and I'm in this place, and I need to perform another miracle to bring more followers? Or was it random? I don't know, that's a weird thought, but that's been my thought my whole life. Like, what made him choose which ones he did and where and with whom? And then of course, I watched The Chosen, whatever anybody thinks about that, but when they show his life and his rapport with the disciples and what he talked about, they didn't know a whole lot, like you said, about what was going on. They were questioning, they were following, but they were kind of ignorant as to what was going on a lot of the years that they followed him. And so I always wondered about, you know, if anybody's read that, like, what was his reasoning?
The only thing I would say that I picked up on, and it wasn't for all the miracles, but for some of them, he was simply moved to compassion for that person. That's what I would say.
Their approach. Their
All right, so, oh, okay.
It seemed to me that Hales was saying Mark really structured his narrative to echo Old Testament miracles. You know, there was a definite plan. I had never seen Mark in that light. I'd seen John as, you know, okay, I'm going to write it so that this makes sense, and so I can put a sermon in here, and so I can put a sermon in here by who comes along. But I had never seen Mark in that light, and it impressed me, but it also, you know, it tells me he selected, not only Jesus selected who to do and where to go and with whom to react, but Mark picked ones that would echo the Old Testament in a very scholarly way, which again makes me feel that Mark was not one of the unskilled, unscholarly disciples.
I just think, could it have been as spontaneous, and this is just a question, as the way that people approached Jesus as to how he reacted to them? And did it have to be all Lynette's saying, it sounds like it was really more planned as far as what Mark recorded, but could it have been more of a responsive kind of thing, just in the
woman who
moment?
touched his garment.
Right.
And,
Or
you
the
know,
woman who's, came and, addressed Jesus about, healing her daughter, and then he said no, and then she said, well, don't the dogs even get to eat the scraps? So, I mean, to me, it's almost like, it's not miracle or not, it doesn't, it's more, I think it's not just one-sided. It has to do with whoever approaches and how he reacts.
interaction. Okay.
The thing about the pigs and the way she described that made me think of, the slaves singing their songs that had all kinds of messages for them that nobody else should, would understand.
That does remind you of that.
Also, it really struck me for the first time reading Pagels that Mark wasn't terribly unlike the Gospel of Thomas in that sense that this kingdom idea was a secret, or there was a secret involved in what Jesus was talking about. And yeah.
That's gonna be the next chapter, I think, is it's gonna talk about
got the
that,
king.
so. We're gonna skip some of these a little bit here, let's see. I think we've kind of answered number 2 in a way with our discussion here, how the historical context of the Gospels influence our understanding of his miracles. And why might the Gospel writers have focused on miracles and wonders as part of their good news message? To me, that one sort of has an obvious answer, but then I'm like, sure, they didn't mean it that way, but.
It confuses me. In Luke and Matthew, we have the story of Jesus in the desert, and he refuses to change the stone into bread, and he refuses to go along with leaping off the building, being saved by angels. So the extraordinary and the unworldly seem to be temptations for Jesus that he resisted. And then there are times in the narrative where he gets so angry and frustrated at those who ask for signs. So I think there was this human conflict in Jesus, knowing he had the authority to heal, but also wishing that they would hear his words and be moved by his words rather than
having to see the miracles. That's a good point too, yeah.
I mean, I wonder if the reason they use that is to try to set him aside as somebody different and special and
Yeah.
has unique powers.
That's what I was thinking when I said, to me, that's the answer, is that they were trying to show that, he was special, he was the Son of God.
Well, I think of the miracles were for common people and that the marginalized community, and that good news is for everything, not just select believers.
Let's see. I think we've kind of talked a little bit about number 4. What is a miracle to you? This is something everybody has their opinion about this.
I would say it's something that defines scientific logic. That to you is something that's impossible that happens.
Anybody got a different definition?
I think sometimes today we miss miracles because we're not looking for them, and they happen sometimes very simply. In incidents where something works out that probably
way it
shouldn't
was
have worked
gonna-
out.
right.
Yeah. So I think that we are looking for these grandiose miracles when they're with us every day.
Or like you're driving along and then something really scary happens and you're like, I could have been killed, and
Right.
and you think to yourself, thank you, Jesus.
But to me, you're talking about every day, and I mean every day. like being able to read. So all of the science all the things we know through science that make it possible to read. When you put them all together, it shouldn't be possible.
You know, a lot of the scientists from hundreds of years ago, they may have started out as preachers or whatever you want to call them back then, but they also studied science because that was their way of sort of praising God for his wonderful creation. To them, it was just this wonderful miracle thing that has happened and that they wanted to know more about it. So yeah, you know, just seeing the world in action is a miracle sometimes. All right. How do you feel about miracles? Do you see them as stories to understand Jesus's message or as real life events that happen? So how many of them see them as stories to understand Jesus's message? Okay, y'all just have to put them up high. Okay.
Yeah.
And then real life events that happened?
Yeah, they could be both.
I think a lot of us, and I'm beyond this room, have had medical events that really define.
Mhm. Mhm. I've heard of people that I know that have, oh, he has cancer. Oh, no, wait, he doesn't have cancer anymore. We don't know what happened, you know, but he doesn't have it, so.
There's a lot. I was thinking the same way, Nancy. But I've seen a lot of other kind of miracles in my life, but science, there's a lot been written on science and religion and miracles and healing. And at some time, I think science and religion and what do they call it? The mystics and all that will all converge together and we'll see links between all those. But I think faith is a big part of, I think, those miracles and I think doctors are beginning to see in hospital people that have faith and feel that they can cross that path and be healed are seeing results. So
I have read that too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, an example, there was a lady that shut down totally. I won't go into the history of her family, but it was just a horrible situation. All except her husband, both sons, and she just shut down and wouldn't talk. They thought she had a stroke. And my sister-in-law hadn't seen her in years and had a great relationship with her and went to talk to her about her family. All of a sudden she started talking. And so you wonder, you know, what triggers that? Is that a miracle? But I do think faith factors into that somewhat.
Part of the problem with it though, is that you think you want to rely on your faith and it doesn't work out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you blame yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's true.
Jane, you're a scientist. How does being a scientist reconcile with miracles? And you know a lot about how things are supposed to work and then things don't work the way they're supposed to work. What are your feelings on those?
Well, I believe that God is omniscient. He knows everything. He created everything, and that's my faith. But as a scientist, I look at all of it and I just don't question that God did it. It's just that I don't know how he did it, you know, and that's the science part, is knowing how he did it. We know how a lot of things come to be. I used to, we weren't supposed to say anything to our kids about the Bible in public school, but I had an AP class and I was very close with them. And one day we were sitting in class and one of the kids asked me, they said, how can you, because we were doing the evolution unit, how can you be a Christian and teach evolution and believe that evolution is real? And I said, well, I would like to think that God is so powerful and so omniscient that he could make a spark that went on to create life, and that life then could change as it needed to for its environment. That is a miracle to me. To say that God has to be like a puppet master and control everything all the time at every minute, that's to me not realistic. You know, and that implies that he's like us, that he has to do things to make things happen. But I think he created things that then were able to evolve on their own. And that's the miracle. to me.
That's so obvious in dealing with restoration of systems and habitats. And you look at, we were just having a big discussion last night at this event I was at about return of fish after dam removal. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
almost like within a year or two. So you see all these things that happen because the system was set up for all that to happen in the beginning and we messed with it.
Right.
So I think it's the same with the human body and with habitats and all that is.
Look at the air quality that changed over the COVID time. You know, I mean, just from our
People
lack
not
of
going
emissions,
anywhere
because people were sequestered. And they did studies, environmental studies on how much things improved in that short amount of time.
So, did that answer your question?
You did fine, thank you.
It always seemed to me, we say we're children of God. So it always seemed to me that when you have a child, you don't direct, you don't walk them to school, you don't, you know, you say, here are the ways that life would go well if you did it this way. And they follow you and, and if they don't follow you, but you can't control you don't want to control everything that they did.
That's right.
That's a good point.
And I think there's something to be said for God created people and their capabilities to be able to help others and to heal others. And
To do some of
Yeah.
his work, right?
Yeah, I think that part of the dilemma starts with misreading the Bible, misreading Genesis as a literal report of how the universe came to be. So it taps into what you were saying earlier about fundamentalism. And then also, we're living in a time where science is being denied. And so for Christians who are open to holding both science and religion and maybe mysticism, and saying they all belong, and it's the integration of these disciplines that are all maybe going in a similar direction, rather than keeping a dualistic sense of one competing with the other.
Exactly.
All right, how much time, how much time? Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that my training is as an engineer. The engineer is the person that takes science and puts it into practical use. That's kind of the simplistic definition in my mind of what an engineer does. And when I think about Glenn talking about biology and the tiny little things that make up the bigger things and on, I'm reminded that we know so little. We claim and probably know a lot in our minds, but in terms of the big picture and the big design, I think we know so little. And that's all part of this discussion. What do we know and what don't we know? And I still think that we're only incrementally picking up more knowledge of the really big picture, because we don't really know what the really big picture is, in my mind anyway. And that to me is the ultimate miracle, is the whole creation that God somehow ordered this whole thing. And it's beyond my comprehension at this point in time to really have a clue as to how big the whole thing is, the whole system, whatever you want to call it, the universe, the galaxies. I don't know what the right word is, but to me, we're just incrementally learning little things, lots of little things.
Well,
But it's only a tiny bit of it.
that's why scientists love being scientists.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna solve this problem, but, wait a minute, there's another one.
Yeah.
There's another one. And there's no, you never can say this is done for, this is over. I know it all.
Well, imagine if Fleming hadn't accidentally discovered penicillin. Where would we be? I mean, when you look at antibiotics and how recent history that is compared to all the time before, that in itself is a humongous thing. And now all these out of body experiences that people come back and share, how can you not believe in a, you know, a greater place or creator or whatever? I don't know.
I would used to tell my students that we don't know the end of everything there is to know, you know, we don't know it. It's not this big, it's probably bigger, and this is how much I know.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I remember you doing that one.
Yeah, remember that one. Yeah, yeah, how much I know. Yeah.
I have a wonder that, I went to UF on Friday to a workshop, about vaccine development. And if y'all remember when I did my little thing about the immune system, you know, the immune system recognizes a foreign particle, the lymphocytes make antibodies to it. Those antibodies are used to combat the disease or the illness. But a pediatrician who was an MD, PhD, is leading a team that they are making nanoparticles out of fat, and they're layered like an onion. And all in those layers, they have the genome of a tumor in a child. Since he's a pediatrician, he's focusing on children. But the genome is used to make these little particles. And when they're on the outside, they present, and the lymphocytes come in and take them and make antibodies. And then they fight the tumor. So it's personalized tumor.
Wow.
And they're having great success in their animal models.
Mm.
And so
I hope those people didn't get laid off.
Well,
I'm telling you, I got to hear four scientists talk that day, and they were all, you could just feel that simmering underneath. Yeah. So, but anyway.
NPR's had a couple, just recently, something on Newton, and I looked, tried to find it, found a bunch of other past things, but Newton was very faith-based, and one of the quotes from the story that they had, it says, Newton's physics was part of his effort to decode the essence of this Lord God, whose essence was indistinguishable from that of the cosmos. So I didn't know, there was a piece way back, it looks like, can Newton and Einstein teach us something about God? But it was an interesting piece recently on Newton.
That is interesting. How much time do I have left? Are we done?
No,
You got
15.
You got 15 minutes.
All right, so.
May I bring us sort of back to Pagels? One thing that really strikes me about Jesus' miracles, and I think it was, she quoted John Dominic Crossan in this, but is a huge element of Jesus' healing miracles particularly, but all of them maybe, was truly seeing people who lived life in a society where they were basically unseen. And there is something profound about that has the ability to transform a person if they are truly seen when their lived experience is the opposite.
I'm going to use a little analogy, and I know it's a very basic and rough analogy, but I have a cat who does not like to be picked up, and he won't sit beside you on the couch. He's like, you pet him like this. So, but he does love to be petted. So if you can entice him close enough that you won't fall over trying to pet him, I've noticed he has some health problems. And I've noticed that when I give that cat a lot of affection, he bounces around the house, he plays with the other cat, he's healthier than normal. But then if I'm busy and I've ignored him a lot, he's hiding under the bed, really quiet, won't come out, he doesn't feel good. The other cat beats him up because I think he detects that something's wrong with this one, you know. So I mean, to me, that's like telling me, pet this cat as much as you can, play with him, you know, and he'll do better, he'll thrive. He's not thriving when I don't pay him attention. So that's like I'm seeing him, whereas the other cat is all up in my face all the time. So I see him all the time and he's happy and healthy. The other one, he kind of gets lost sometimes. So,
Too much competition.
I think
Yeah.
so. I think it is. But anybody else want to add anything or feel like we haven't discussed something that we should have about this chapter?
I struggle with people that claim to be healers. I know this is not probably out of the book.
No,
but I do. I mean, they go in the prison system lets them come in. They have no theological background. They have nothing, and they're approved to go in there, and they have massive audiences, and that these people are following them. And I don't understand how the state and federal let these people go into the prisons and supposedly heal people. And I don't know how that even works, and I don't know if we have people in Marion County that are so-called healers, but I struggle with that.
I do too. I think that once again, it's that psychological aspect of it that, you think you're going to be healed, so you feel better. That placebo effect, I do. And then I think that, I don't think there's any scientific evidence to support that anyone's ever actually healed someone, is there? Would you?
Well, we would-
Well, I mean, people claim it all the time in the Catholic Church. Verifies
they
it.
will.
There's their criteria for sainthood.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just because I said I was healed. I mean, there's more to it than
Oh,
that.
they do the examinations
Oh,
and
yeah,
all that.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
it's not-
there's gotta be 3 proven miracles or something like.
There are some things that are unexplainable medically, I think, that
Yes.
occasionally happen.
But did it occur because the person believed so much, that something we don't know about the brain, took over and made chemicals or whatever?
So in the last Science Journal, there was a whole article about research on that there is a connection. They're doing functional MRIs and people, and it was a small study, but it was trying to understand how the brain could affect pain. And the picture was a bunch of pathways from your prefrontal cortex, where you're thinking, but also your amygdala's emotions. They're all sending messages now from this research. They're sending messages back. So your spinal, your pain, the rest of your body is sending messages to your spinal. And I've always thought about the placebo effect as the pain gets to your brain and your brain does something to it up here. That's not what they found out. They found out that the message comes into the spinal cord and it goes, that message can be affected by our endogenous opioids, because those 4 places in your brain, but the ones that stick out to me are the prefrontal cortex and amygdala. They send messages to a spot in your medulla oblongata that sends out opioids that go to the spinal cord to
Wow.
affect pain at that point. And the biology of it and they said, because your prefrontal cortex is involved and your amygdala is involved, then your intellect, your thinking about yourself, and your emotional complex section are both affecting and can sending messages to those signals that are coming up from there. So there's a placebo effect is, I don't think,
Technical term, but
yeah, I guess it's unfair to think that that's, okay, so I was also reading about this girl, I never heard this, and this might have been this girl that was there. So much trauma from people who have gone, this was all in Sweden, and they were immigrants. They couldn't speak Swedish or anything, but they had run out from Africa and they were there, Turk, and she was out of it. She had not for years moved, spoken. She was lying in bed. As long as they had a feeding tube in her, she was alive, but she didn't move. She didn't open up her mouth. She didn't talk. She didn't open up her eyes, nothing for years. And there's apparently a syndrome that happens. And some people wake up from it later, but she did not. And what was my point? I had a connection to that kind of thing. Oh, the point is, she had so much emotional trauma that you can see all of this, just, I'm just out, I don't want
Yeah,
to do this.
that's how this lady was talking.
Yeah, but this woman wasn't doing nothing. She was like she was dead. So back to Jesus, I think that's what Jesus healed most often was the emotional selves. You know, the story that one story Mark tells about, they let the paralytic down through the roof. And Jesus, and he walked, but a key thing that Jesus said is your sins are forgiven you. And that's a way of saying all that heavy stuff that you've been carrying is, yeah.
What he couldn't heal the leper, but he made people accept the leper or that type of stuff. Isn't that part of what happened?
I don't know. Do you know about that one? The leper?
Well, she told you, that's the crossing argument, that, you know, whether or not, it's the idea that they were accepted and seen, you know, whether they were healed or not, is not the message. The message is they were seen. Yeah.
But can't you say that was healing? You know, in a
Well,
way.
you could, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you still wouldn't say.
But they
So,
weren't shunned.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I like that.
Mhm.
But go back, it really truly is a mystery. So we don't know. And what's happened over time is this attempt to codify everything and fit everything into a nice, neat little box and say, well,
They know
not
that you
even
must
not even
understand.
understand, not even understand, but codify it and require through dogma that this is it and this is what you must believe. And we're still evolving, you know, as science advances and everything else. And they almost, you know, especially in my faith tradition, it's parallel tracks and you can't cross them. And, you know, you've got to be over here and you can't be over here. But, you know, you're as a thinking person, you know, that's my concern with those that are so fundamental about all of this is, you know, they tie themselves up in knots trying to make sense of all this and you can't. So you can't. And that's what faith is about. And if it means suspending belief, then that's okay too. But everyone's got to find their own path. And we try and fit everything into a neat little box and explain what we can explain. And that's why this really makes you think about all of that, because, you know, the different evolution of ideas and whatnot over time. But we're still evolving. You know, Sagan said, you know, you made that little dot over there. That's what Sagan said, the pale blue dot. And even since he passed away, the advances that have been made since his work is just incredible. Even Hawking said at the very end, he said, we can go back so far to the Big Bang, but what happened before the Big Bang? So, you know, that's been the dilemma that people have dealt with. So is it God?
And listening to Gwen talk reminded me of her wonderful lessons that God's awesome wonders that are like chlorophyll one and on cells and then mind boggling. And as this gentleman was saying, we get people stuck on the story of Adam and Eve, which is such a cheap trick. And with the awesomeness of the universe.
Yeah.
And again, I said this last week, who am I to tell the creator of the universe how to go about his creation? I think some of those people who insist on Adam and Eve just don't have enough respect for God.
you know, I agree with that last statement, that to me, it's almost disrespectful to say that, oh, I have it all figured out. It's right here. You know?
Yeah.
Well, we had a teacher that we worked with, Nancy Brown, who got into it with her honors English class about Noah's Ark. And the whole school found out about it. We got called in and we were all, and here I'm teaching science. I'm like, oh my gosh. And, you know, and her whole point was it was symbolism because she was an English teacher. And, you know, there's no evidence. Oh, well, there's part of the ark in this country that one kid said. And it was just a big, big deal at the time for our school. And we were basically, our principal's like, you can't talk about it and stop it and blah, blah, blah.
Talking about it.
Yeah.
Nancy couldn't.
No, Nancy couldn't stop. She's still doing it online now. So that just wasn't, I was a young teacher and that was like, my lesson was, do I even want to teach the evolution chapter? I was so scared, you know, and Jane knows and how that worked with our kids. They come in and they are they believe one thing. Only a few can, I guess at that age, have any other thoughts other than what their parents have told them. And it's difficult. Well, you know, St. John's, what they taught in their science, as you and I know, there were certain things that Lauren came home with her daughter and asked her, and Jane had to like tell her what the teacher said. And it was, those are hard times. I mean, you know, like you said, to be open.
Be open.
You've got to allow room.
You have
for-
to allow room. You have to suspend belief.
You know, I was amazed when I learned that fundamentalism is a fairly recent set of beliefs. The name suggests more importance than it actually is.
Yeah,
And if we look at the historical context of fundamentalism, we might understand why it exists.
Yeah. Good point.
Karen Armstrong, great writer about religion, said fundamentalism is always a reaction against science.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
People who cannot cope with the things we have found out,
But they can't,
probably
yeah.
because of the grace of God.
Right.
Sure.
Who are you, by the way? I mean, we do let people we don't know come in.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say we should have introduced